Hello students, welcome to this another discussion video on the topic inventories. These are our unit learning outcomes. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify items to be included in the single line item inventories, account for inventory transactions using periodic and perpetual inventory system, record transactions using gross method and net method, and identify the items includable as part of inventory cost. First, let us define what inventories are. So, inventories are assets held for sale in the ordinary course of business or in the process of production for such sale or in the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or in the rendering of services. Inventories encompass goods purchased and held for resale. So take note, pag sinabing inventories is our goods that we purchased and we intend to resell them in the ordinary course of our business. So these are the examples. First, merchandise purchased by a retailer and held for resale. So for example, bumili ka ng bigas, tapos ibebenta mo rin yung bigas. So yung bigas pag hindi pa nabenta is considered your inventory. Another example is land and other property held for resale by a subdivision entity and a real estate developer. So take note class that here, ito land siya. Baka we might think that this is a property, plant, and equipment. But take note that since the purpose, no, or since the usual or the normal ordinary course of this entity, the entity is actually a state, real estate developer siya. So in short, yung kanyang binibenta talaga ay land and other properties. So since yan yung yun yung usual na binibenta niya, then yun yung i-consider natin as inventories. Inventories also encompass finished goods produced, goods in process, and materials and supplies awaiting use in the production process. So that is in the case of manufacturing concern. So we have here classes of inventories. So first is for trading or merchandising concern. I know you are very familiar with this already because this was discussed already in your basic accounting ACC 111. So yung trading or merchandising concern na inventory, ang tawag natin dyan ay merchandise inventory. So goods that we just purchase and sell it as is. So pag bumili ka ng bigas, you're also selling bigas, no, at as is. So there's no alteration made on the item being sold. Another is for a manufacturing concern. So for a manufacturing concern, mas marami-rami yung classes of inventory. So I hope or hopefully no sa inyong ACC 123 na subject cost accounting, nakadiscuss na kayo ng ganito. So for a manufacturing concern, we have here 4 classes of inventory. So one is the finished goods inventory. So ito yung goods na tapos na, ready for sale na sila. Another is a work in process inventory. Ito yung mga goods na kulang pa, no? Hindi pa siya tapos pero naka-start na ng production. So naka-start ka na kaso hindi mo pa siya natapos. So that's work in process inventory. Another is raw materials inventory. So ito yung mga inventory or materials na hindi pa nasisimulan, na hindi pa na punta doon sa production. So, raw materials inventory yan sila. Meron din tayong factory or manufacturing supplies inventory. So, ito yung related to mga overhead, mga indirect materials, which of course we also maintain, no, yung mga factory or manufacturing supplies inventory. Yung raw materials inventory naman class, ito yung mga materials which are considered as direct materials. So, yung mga main talaga na materials needed to produce the certain goods. So, mabalikan lang natin pag sinabing manufacturing concern, of course, alam natin na ang nature ng business nito ay bumibili sila ng raw materials and then i-convert nila into finished goods. So, there is this what we call alteration. Now, there's still a process to be made so that your raw materials will become finished goods ready for sale. So, ito yung importante. No? We should know what are those goods which are includable in the caption inventories or inventory. So, as a rule, all goods to which the entity has title shall be included. So, here, may na-mention siya about title. So, it talks about the ownership of the goods. So, if you own the goods, then you should include it in your inventory. So, the phrase passing of title is a legal language, which means goods are includable in the inventory regardless of location at the point of time at which ownership changes. So, again, it has something to do with ownership. So, if you own the goods as of the cut-off date, then it is rightful to include it in your records na as part of your inventory. Now, what is a legal test? So, this is the legal test. No? Is the entity the owner of the goods to be inventoried? If your answer is yes, then that goods, of course, are included in your inventory. If your answer is no, then that goods are not included in the inventory. So, simple as that. If you own the goods, then you have to record it as part of your inventory. Otherwise, do not record it because it's not yours. So, here are the items included in the inventory. So, first, goods owned by the entity and on hand. Of course, very understandable. If you own it and it is on hand, then you have to include it as part of your inventory. Also, you have to include goods in transit and sold FOB destination. So, why later we'll have a summary, no? Or parang review na rin ng ACC 111 niya because this was already discussed before. Goods in transit and purchase FOB shipping point. Goods out on consignment. We will discuss this also later. And goods in the hands of salesmen or agents because of course you still own those goods. Hindi naman yung considered sold na kapag nandun sa mga salesman or agents yung goods mo. Also, goods held by customers on approval or on trial. So again, these items here should be included as part of your inventory. So pag hindi siya na-include, then you have to add it no, sa iyong inventory. So there's this exception to the legal test. Kasi sabi natin, di ba, pag kung sino na yung owner, then siya dapat ang mag-recognize ng inventory. So there's this exception to the legal test. So this is related to installment contracts, which is very usual or common for mga appliance center, yung for example, Imperial or MCOR. So for those type of businesses, no, uso sa kanila yung installment na sale, no? So we have here installment contracts. So installment contracts may provide for retention of title by the seller until the selling price is fully collected. So following the legal test, the goods sold in installment pieces are still the property of the seller and therefore normally includable in his inventory. Kasi nga 'di ba, hindi pa fully paid yung item. So, pag hindi pa fully paid, somehow, meron pang panghahawakan si seller. So, pag hindi nakabayad si buyer, then of course, i-repossess na yung item. But, take note, no? However, in such a case, it is an accepted accounting procedure to record the installment sale as a regular sale involving deferred income on the part of the seller and as a regular purchase on the part of the buyer. So having said that, pag ganito, kasi 'di ba, this is exception to the legal test. Yes, meron pang pinanghahawakan si seller sa item na binili ni buyer, but here, um, if goods no are sold, this is an exception to that legal test. So therefore, now if the goods on installment are included in the inventory or goods sold on installment are included in the inventory of the buyer, so sa buyer na siya ma-include and excluded from that of the seller. So this is a clear example of substance over form. So kasi in form, pwedeng hindi pa nga talaga um, owned by the buyer ang item, no? Kasi it's still not fully paid, but in substance, kay buyer na talaga yung item. No? So, dapat i-exclude na kay seller, tsaka i-include na kay buyer. So, that's the exception to the legal test. Now, this one is just a review of what you have learned in ACC 111. So, who is the owner of the goods in transit? So, this is something to do with goods which are in transit at the end of the accounting period. Kasi, no question, no, pag dumating na yung goods sa premises ng buyer, of course, the buyer owns it already. However, there are cases wherein hindi pa dumating, pero owner na pala or ang buyer na pala yung owner. Depende sa shipping terms, no, kung paano siya net yung goods. So that is why here we have common shipping terms. We have FOB shipping point or free on board shipping point and FOB destination. So anong sabi dito? Pag sinabing FOB shipping point, again, the ownership of the goods is already transferred from the seller to the buyer at the point of shipment pa lang. So while the goods are in transit, the buyer owns it already. Na? So whatever happens to the goods while in transit, so burden yun or shoulder na yun or risk na yun ng buyer. Now, kapag ang goods are shipped, no, FOB shipping point and they are still in transit, so if you are the buyer, then you have to include it in your inventory. If you are the seller, do not include it in your inventory because you don't own it anymore. Now, for FOB destination naman, FOB destination, di ba, ang goods or ang ownership ng goods ay matatransfer lang sa buyer from the seller when the goods reach its destination. So, pagdating na talaga doon sa premises ni buyer. So, in that case, the goods are still owned by the seller while they are in transit. So, ibig sabihin kapag nag-prepare tayo ng financial statements, tapos sinabi, no, cut off test na. So, ano ba to? Is this goods to be included as part of your inventory, of the inventory of the seller? So, you check the shipping term. So, if the shipping term is FOB destination, so ibig sabihin, the seller still owns that inventory. So, since owned pa ng seller ang inventory, kailangan niyang i-include pa, no, or include pa ang goods na yon sa kanyang financial statement. So, as part of the inventory. So, again, if that's FOB destination and hindi pa nakarating, that goods are still owned by the seller. So, therefore, they should consider it, they should include it as part of their inventory. So, pag FOB destination, goods are included on the point of view of the seller and excluded in the point of view of the buyer. So, we have here terms which will answer the question, who paid for the transportation cost? Usually, or generally, di ba, the basic rule dyan is kung sino yung owner ng goods while they are in transit, sila yung dapat na magbayad ng transportation cost kasi they own it already. Now, there are times wherein yung dapat nagbayad ay hindi siya ang actual na nagbayad. So, paano natin malalaman kung sino ang nagbayad ng transportation cost? So, we have these terms here, freight collect and freight prepaid. So pag sinabing freight collect, ibig sabihin, hindi pa binayaran ni seller ang transportation cost nung shinip na yung goods. So, that is why ang tawag freight collect. Kasi ibig sabihin, kolektahin na lang doon sa premises ng buyer ang transportation cost. Na? So, doon na magbabayad si buyer ng transportation cost. So, freight collect yan. Now, pag freight prepaid, ibig sabihin, before pa shinip, no? Before pa pinalarga ang goods, then binayaran na, prepaid na yung freight charges or yung transportation cost ni seller. So, therefore, ang nagbayad ng transportation cost po sinabing freight prepaid ay ang seller. Okay, let's have the summary, no? Para ma-combine na lang. So, again, these two terms here will tell us who is the owner of the goods in transit. Kapag FOB shipping point, that's the buyer. Kapag FOB destination, that's the seller. Another is these terms here, freight collect and freight prepaid, will tell us who paid for the transportation cost. So, pag sinabing freight collect, it was paid by the buyer. And kapag sinabing freight prepaid, it was paid by the seller. So, for example, pag sinabing FOB shipping point, freight collect, so walang problema because ang dapat na magbayad ay ang buyer kasi siya yung owner and yung actual na nagbayad ay ang buyer din. So, walang problema doon. But, pag sinabing FOB shipping point tapos freight prepaid, so, ibig sabihin, si buyer ay may pagkakautang pa kay seller in relation to the transportation cost. So, dapat idagdag ito ni seller doon sa receivable niya kay buyer. Or, si buyer, sa point of view ni buyer, magdadagdag siya ng payable, no? Para naman doon sa transportation cost na dapat siya ang nagbayad. For the FOB destination naman, walang problema kapag ang shipping term ay FOB destination tapos freight prepaid. So, ibig sabihin, ang dapat magbayad ay si seller and ang nagbayad talaga ay ang seller. So, okay na yun, no? Kasi siya dapat ang magbayad, siya na ang nagbayad. Now, kapag FOB destination pero freight collect, ano ibig sabihin nun? Dapat, kasi ang owner ay si seller, siya dapat pinagbayad. Pero yung actual na nagbayad ay si buyer kasi nga freight collect. So, anong mangyayari? So, yung receivable ni seller, i-reduce na lang sa amount na binayaran ni buyer sa transportation cost. At the same time, yung payable ni buyer ay reduce na lang sa transportation cost na binayaran niya on behalf of the seller. So, that's related to the shipping terms. We have here additional maritime shipping terms. We have FAS or free alongside. So, here, a seller who ships FAS must bear all the expenses and risk involved in delivering the goods to the dock next to or alongside the vessel on which the goods are to be shipped. So, take note, seller yung mag-bear ng risk and expenses from the premises of the seller until doon sa dock, no, or doon sa pier. So, the buyer bears the cost of loading and shipment, and thus the title passes to the buyer when the carrier takes possession of the goods. So, dito sa free alongside, ang goods ay, or ang ownership ng goods ay matatransfer kapag na-load na siya doon sa vessel. So, para siyang FOB shipping point, no? Na kapag na-load na, kapag nandoon na, buyer na yung mag-take ng risk kasi they own it already. So, that's free alongside or FAS. Another maritime shipping term is the CIF or cost insurance and freight. So under the shipping contract, the buyer agrees to pay in lump sum the cost of the goods, the insurance cost, and freight charge. So yun yung ang buyer ang magbabayad no ng cost, insurance, and the freight charges. The shipping contract will be modified as CF, which means that The buyer agrees to pay a lump sum of the cost of the goods and the freight charge only. So wala, hindi kasaling yung insurance. In other case, the seller must pay for the cost of loading. Thus, the title and risk of loss shall pass to the buyer upon delivery of the goods to the carrier. Okay, another maritime shipping term here. We have ex-ship. So here, a seller who delivers the goods ex-ship bears all the risk, the expenses and risk of loss until the goods are unloaded, at which time title and risk of loss shall pass to the buyer. So in short, para itong FOB destination no, na mapapass on lang kay buyer ang kanyang or ang ownership ng goods kapag na-unload na no, doon sa carrier or sa vessel ang goods. So para siyang FOB destination. Okay, so let's proceed now to the consigned goods. So ano naman itong consigned goods? No? Or this is related to consignment. So ano yung consignment? This is a method of marketing goods in which the owner called the consignor transfers physical possession of certain goods to an agent called the consignee who sells them on the owner's behalf. So there are two parties involved. So one is the consignor, the other one is the consignee. Consignor, siya yung owner ng goods. Tapos, no, binilin lang muna niya doon sa consignee. So take note that there's no sale na nangyari. Wala pang sale na nangyari dito. So si consignee is only holding the goods no on behalf of the owner. So ibebenta niyo yon on behalf of the owner. Pag hindi na benta, wala pang obligasyon si consignee kay consignor. So take note class, consigned goods shall be included in the consignor's inventory. So pag consigned goods or goods held out no, for consignment, tapos ikaw yung entity, no, ikaw yung consignor, so that item should be included as part of your inventory. But of course, no, kapag ikaw ang consignee, dapat i-exclude mo yon from your inventory. So, pag ang statement ay goods held on consignment, so ikaw yung consignee doon. So, therefore, you have to exclude that from your inventory kasi hindi mo yan pagmamayari. Binilin lang sa iyo. Freight and other handling charges and goods out on consignment are part of the cost of goods consigned. So we have here an example. A consignee sells consigned goods for 100,000. So this amount is remitted to the consignor less the commission of 15,000 and advertising of 2,000. So this is the entry to record no, the cash remittance. So this is the entry of the consignor to record the sale. So you debit cash of 83,000. Commission, which is an expense, 15,000. Advertising, also an expense, 2,000. And a credit, no, dapat naka-indent ito. A credit to sales of 100,000. So, dapat indented yung sales na to. So, that's for the part of the consignor. So, just take note that upon delivery of the consigned goods, so yung consignor class, walang entry doon. No, ang gagawin niya lang ay memorandum entry lang, no? Parang just a memo entry na just to check or just to trace kung saan niya binilin na yung mga goods na for consignment. So, since memo entry lang yan, it will be necessary no, for the consignor to maintain subsidiary ledger for various consignees. So again, take note, wala pang sale na nangyari, wala ka pang receivable unless nabenta na ng consignee ang goods. Okay, so let's proceed to the statement presentation. So generally, inventories are classified as current assets. and they shall be presented as one line item in the statement of financial position, the details of which shall be disclosed in the notes to financial statements. So, for example, the note shall disclose the composition of the inventories of a manufacturing entity. So, dapat nakalista doon magkano ang finished goods, magkano ang goods in process, magkano ang raw materials, magkano ang manufacturing supplies inventory. So, ang details ay nasa notes to FS na. Pero on the face of the statement of financial position, dapat isang amount lang ang mag-a-appear. So, let's proceed to accounting for inventories. So, this is also a review of your basic accounting because as you know, there are two methods of accounting your inventory. So one is using the periodic inventory system and the other one is the perpetual inventory system. So periodic inventory system calls for the physical counting of goods on hand at the end of the accounting period to determine quantities. So dito sa periodic inventory system, gagamit tayo ng account title na purchases, purchase returns and allowances, no? So, wala tayong, or ang ating inventory, ang ating merchandise inventory account ay hindi siya mababago or hindi or walang changes during the period, only when there is physical count na gagawin. So, dyan pa lang ma-establish kung magkano na yung inventory mo at the end of the period kapag nag-conduct ka ng physical count. So generally, this is used when the individual inventory items have small peso investment. So parang pag marami yung items tapos minimal lang or small lang ang peso value, then periodic inventory system will be applicable no for that particular entity. Like for example, yung mga hardware for example, no, or say for example, mga sari-sari store, mga department store. So, yan, no? Marami silang items pero of small peso value. So, mas bagay sa kanila ang periodic inventory system. Another is itong perpetual inventory system. So, this requires the maintenance of records. Tawag natin dyan ay stock cards that usually offer a running summary of the inventory flow or inflow and outflow. So, dito sa perpetual inventory system, any movement, any change no, in the physical flow of your inventory ay nire-record natin. So, say for example, pag meron tayong purchases, we really debit it to inventory account. Kapag meron tayong sales, we credit it to inventory account also. So, meaning, at any given point in time, no, you can just look at your records and then makakukuha ka na ng information kung magkano yung ending balance ng inventory mo. Of course, hindi naman nangangahulugan na kapag meron ka ng stock card, hindi ka na magpa-perform ng physical count. Still, you perform physical count at the end of the accounting period to verify no, whether yung nasa record mo ay nag-reconcile ba doon sa actual no, on hand. And what will prevail, of course, ang magpre-prevail ay yung actual na physical count mo. No, if there are differences, then you have to recognize inventory shortage or overage. So itong perpetual inventory system na to, this is commonly used where the inventory items treated individually represent a relatively large peso investment. Like for example, yung mga car companies like Toyota, Mitsubishi, no, ang kanilang inventory ay isa, dalawa, tatlo, no, but minimal lang yung number, pero ang value niya ay, or ang peso amount ay malaki. So, I have here in illustration, no, just to present or point out the differences, no, yung periodic inventory system tsaka ng perpetual inventory system. So, we have here the specific transactions. So, first, purchase of merchandise on account. The amount is 300,000. So, under the periodic inventory system, so take note, we're using this one. Gamit tayo ng gamit tayo ng account title na purchases. Whereas sa perpetual inventory system, ang gamit natin ay merchandise inventory. Kasi nga, that is to recognize the increase no, in your merchandise inventory. Next is payment of freight on the purchase, 20,000. So, dito sa periodic inventory system, ang gamit natin ay freight in, which we know that this is an adjunct account. So, idadagdag natin yan doon sa purchases para makompute natin yung cost ng ating inventory. Whereas sa perpetual inventory system, ang ating gamit ay merchandise inventory simply because itong freight na to, again, ay part ng cost ng inventory. So, might as well include it, no, record it as merchandise inventory para ma-add up na doon sa cost ng ating inventory. Now, when there is a return of merchandise purchased amounting to 30,000, so we debit accounts payable for 30,000 and we credit purchase return. I hope you can still recall in your basic accounting. Credit purchase returns and allowances for 30,000. Whereas under the perpetual inventory system, ang gamit natin ay merchandise inventory. So this is to acknowledge the decrease no, in your physical na inventory. So next we have here the transaction. So what if there's a sale of merchandise on account? So under the periodic inventory system, you debit accounts receivable, of course, you credit sales. Now, sa perpetual inventory system class, na aside from this entry, this is just the same with that of the periodic inventory system. But aside from this, there's an additional entry. This is to recognize the decrease no, in your merchandise inventory, which should be recorded at cost. Ito siya selling price. Ito siya at cost. So, we recognize cost of goods sold. Paano ba kinompute yung 240,000? So, sabi niya dito, ang gross profit daw ay 40%. So, ibig sabihin, ang cost ratio ay 60%. So, that's 400,000 times 60%. It will give you 240,000. So, you debit cost of goods sold and credit merchandise inventory no, at 240,000. Another is itong return of merchandise sold no, from a customer. So, yung customer naman yung nag-return. So, we debit sales return and we credit accounts receivable. So, for the periodic inventory system. So, that's also the same no, sa perpetual inventory system. Kaso lang, meron pa tayong isa pang entry, yung i-recognize natin yung increase ng merchandise inventory natin and decrease ng ating cost of goods sold. So, you have, paano kinompute yung 15,000? So, that's 25,000 times again the cost ratio of 60%. No? So, that's 25,000 times that's 35,000 times 60%. So that's 15,000, which is your cost, that represents your cost. Then the last transaction here, adjustment of the ending inventory. So for this one, this is a result of the physical count. So for the periodic inventory system, during that time, you have to recognize your merchandise inventory end, no? I-establish natin yung merchandise inventory end natin at 65,000. Credit tayo ng income summary at 65,000. So, that's for the periodic inventory system. Now, for the perpetual inventory system class, wala tayong gagawing adjustment kung ang ating physical count ay equivalent lang doon sa ating records. No? So, as a rule, the ending merchandise inventory is not adjusted. So, the balance of the merchandise inventory account represents the ending inventory. But again, now we have to compare yung physical count mo doon sa iyong records. Kapag may discrepancies, then there is a need for us to account for inventory shortage or inventory overage. So, we have here inventory shortage or overage. So again, kapag hindi magtali no yung iyong physical count doon sa records, then There's, of course, inventory shortage or overage. So, example, in the illustration, the merchandise inventory account has a debit balance of 65,000. So, there is a short inventory shortage or overage if at the end of the accounting period, the physical count indicates a different amount. Hence, an adjustment is necessary to recognize any inventory shortage or overage. So, example, if the physical count shows inventory at on hand at 55,000, then the following adjustment is necessary. So, yung ating record is 65,000 pero ang ating inventory physical count ay 55,000 lang. Ibig sabihin, kulang ng 10,000. So, yung kulang na 10,000 na yun, you have to recognize it as inventory shortage. You debit it at 10,000 and you credit merchandise inventory at 10,000. So, para yung record natin na 65 ay maging 55,000 kasi yun lang naman talaga ang on hand. So the inventory shortage is usually close to cost of goods sold because this is often the result of normal shrinkage and breakage in inventory. So again, kapag normal lang na shrinkage sa breakage, then that inventory shortage ay absorb na doon sa cost of goods sold. However, abnormal and material shortage shall be separately classified and presented as other expense. So, considered na siya as loss kapag abnormal na or material yung shortage na na-report. So, we have trade discounts and cash discounts. So, this is again a review of what was discussed in Accounting 111 na in your basic accounting. So, just to review, trade discounts, these are deductions from the list or catalog price in order to arrive at the invoice price, which is the amount actually charged to the buyer. So the purpose of trade discounts is to encourage trading or increase sales, no? So just take note that trade discounts are not recorded in our books. Another is the cash discount. So for cash discounts, it's our deductions from the invoice price when payment is made within the discount period. So the purpose of this cash discount is to encourage prompt payment. So cash discounts are recorded as purchase discount by the buyer and sales discount by the seller. Purchase discount is deducted from the purchases to arrive at the net purchases, and sales discount is deducted from sales to arrive at the net sales revenue. So I hope you can still recall the concepts of trade discounts and cash discounts. So we have here an illustration. So the list price of merchandise purchase is 500,000 less 20% and 10%. So these are trade discounts here with credit terms of 5, 10, and 30. So this means that the trade discounts are 20% and 10%, and the cash discount is 5% if payment is made in 10 days. So the full amount of the invoice is paid if the payment is made after 10 days and within the credit period of 30 days. So we have here to compute for the invoice price. So you start with the list price and then you get the first trade discount, which is 20% of your 500,000. That's 100,000. So this is your net amount, 400,000. Then you deduct the second trade discount, which is 10% of your 400,000. So that's 40,000. So your invoice price is 360,000. Alternatively, you can also compute for your trade desk of your invoice price. You can compute for your invoice price by multiplying lang directly 500,000 by 80%. So you still get 400,000 and multiply 400,000 by 90%. Still you will get 360,000. So that's a shortcut in computing for your invoice price kapag dalawa ang trade discount. Now, kapag nakabayad within the discount period, so deduct pa tayo ng cash discount na 18,000. So, pag nakabayad within the discount period, Ang babayaran na lang ng buyer ay 342,000. Pag beyond na, ang babayaran niya ay 360,000. So we have here methods of recording purchases. So just take note that this is just similar to what was discussed no in accounts receivable, except that in accounts receivable, we are accounting in the point of view of the seller. So this time you're accounting in the point of view of the buyer. So there are two methods of recording purchases. We have the gross method and the net method. So under the gross method, the purchases and accounts payable are recorded at gross amount, whereas under the net method, the purchases and accounts payable are recorded at net amount naman. So we have here an illustration. So we have here purchases on account amounting to 200,000, 210 and 30 yung kanyang credit term. So under the gross method, this will be your entry. You debit purchases 200,000, which is the gross amount. Credit accounts payable at 200,000, also the gross amount. Net method naman, take note, no, the same lang ang kanyang account title, except that we are deducting na the 2% possible the cash discount, which is 4,000. That's 200,000 times 2%. That's 4,000. Now, assume that payment is within the discount period. So, pag nakabayad within the discount period, this will be your entry. Debit tayo ng accounts payable. Credit tayo ng cash at 196,000 and credit tayo ng purchase discount at 4,000. Under the net method, kapag nakabayad ng within the discount period, so wala akong problema, you simply debit accounts payable at 196,000 and credit cash at 196,000. Now, if the payment is made beyond the discount period, hindi naka-avail ng discount, so magde-debit tayo ng accounts payable at 100,000 and cash at 100,000 under the gross method. Under sa net method, since ang na-establish natin na accounts payable ay 196,000 lang, this one, so yun lang din yung amount na i-debit natin, no? So, debit tayo ng 196,000. Debit tayo ng purchase discount loss na 4,000. So, this one class is an expense, no? Para siyang loss. Other expense na ito, 4,000. Credit tayo ng cash at 200,000. So, ano ba ang mas maiging gamitin ng gross method or net method? So, the cost measured under the net method represents the cash equivalent price on the date of payment, and therefore take note, it is theoretically correct. No? The theoretically correct historical cost. So, yung net method. Favored theoretically. However, in practice, most entities record purchases at gross invoice amount. Technically, the gross method violates the matching principle because discounts are recorded only when taken or when cash is paid rather than when purchases that give rise to the discounts are made. Moreover, this procedure does not allocate discounts taken between goods sold and goods on hand. Despite its theoretical shortcomings, take note that the gross method is supported on practical grounds. So, the gross method is more convenient than the net method from the bookkeeping na standpoint. So, okay lang, no? Gamitin natin yung gross method. Next, we have here the cost of inventories. So, the cost of inventories is comprised of, first, the cost of purchase, the cost of conversion in case of manufacturing concern, and other costs incurred in bringing the inventories to their present location and condition. So, isa-isahin natin. So, yung cost of purchase, of course, no, the cost of your inventory will include the cost of purchase. So, ano ba yung kasama sa cost of purchase? So, yung purchase price, yung import duties and irrecoverable na mga taxes, yung freight, yung handling and other costs directly attributable to the acquisition of finished goods, materials, and services. So, these are the cost of purchase which should be part, no, as I mean, part siya ng inventory mo. So, trade discounts, rebates, and other similar items are deducted in determining the cost of purchase. So, the cost of purchase shall not include, take note, foreign exchange differences, which arise directly from the recent acquisition of inventories involving foreign currency. Like, for example, nag-import ka ng goods in Indonesia. So, kapag merong difference no, sa, um, kasi di ba nagpa-fluctuate man yung ating peso value against foreign currencies. So, hindi affected ang cost ng inventories doon sa fluctuations ng foreign exchanges. Moreover, when inventories are purchased with deferred settlement terms, so yung matagal mo pa siyang bayaran no, or installment siya. So take note that the difference between the purchase price for a normal credit terms and the amount paid is recognized as interest expense over the period of financing. Kasi most probably, kapag deferred yung term, no, longer ang term na babayaran mo ang inventory, ma-consider na yan or meron na yang i-consider na time value of money. So with that, yung difference ng purchase price talaga pag cash mo binili compared to yung babayaran mo in a longer period. So pag may difference yan, i-consider natin siya as interest expense na as a result of yung time value of money nga na kino-consider natin. Another is cost of conversion. So, cost of conversion, this is applicable kapag manufacturing concern. So, the cost of conversion of inventories includes costs directly related to the units of production, such as the direct labor, plus yung tinatawag natin na factory overhead or production overhead. So, yung production overhead natin may be fixed or variable. So, pag fixed production overhead, these are indirect cost of production that remains relatively constant regardless of the volume of the production. Kaya nga tawag fixed siya kasi whatever is the level of production, the amount is the same. So examples are depreciation and maintenance of factory building and equipment, the cost of factory management and administration. The other one is the variable production overhead, which is indirect cost of production that varies directly with the volume of production. So examples are indirect labor and indirect materials. So again, these are the cost of conversion. Direct labor, tsaka yung overhead mo or factory overhead mo, which could be fixed or variable. So the allocation of fixed production overhead. How do we allocate the fixed production overhead to the cost of conversion? So that is based on the normal capacity of the production facilities. So pag sinabi natin normal capacity class, this is the production expected to be achieved on an average over a number of periods or seasons under normal circumstances, taking into account the loss of capacity resulting for plant maintenance. So yan talaga yung capacity ng iyong factory. So that will be the basis of your fixed production overhead. The amount of fixed overhead allocated to each production of a unit of production is not increased as a consequence of low production or idle plant. The unallocated fixed overhead is recognized as expense in the period in which it is incurred. Kasi nga, di ba, nagbase ka sa normal capacity. So, it is possible that the production is low or higher than that. So, we did not consider the actual production here, but the normal capacity as you have determined. So, pag may unallocated na fixed overhead, then you have to recognize them as expense. So, allocation of variable production overhead. So, for the variable production overhead, that is allocated based on the actual use of production facilities. So, kung sa variable ay nagbase tayo sa normal capacity, dito naman ay actual use tayo. A production process will result in more than one product being produced simultaneously. So for sure, you will encounter this in your cost accounting. So this is the case, for example, when joint products are produced or where there is a main product and a byproduct. So example yung main product saka byproduct. So example natin dito ay, so for example, yung main product mo ay dressed chicken. So yung main product, yung buong manok talaga. Ano yung mga byproducts niyan? Pwede yung mga chicken feet or yung head ng chicken, tsaka possible yung neck ng chicken. So these are byproducts already. So when the cost of conversion are not separately identifiable, they're allocated between the products on a rational and consistent basis. For example, on the basis of relative sales value of each product. Most byproducts by their nature are not material. Byproducts are measured at net realizable value and its value is deducted from the cost of the main product. So take note that these items here, itong main product, byproducts, you will get to know more about this in your cost accounting subject. So doon na lang yung detalye nito. So last, yung other cost natin. So other cost is included in the cost of inventories only to the extent that it is incurred in bringing the inventories to their present location and condition. So example, if it may be appropriate to include the cost of designing the product for specific customers in the cost of inventories. So since that particular design is intended for a specific customer, then you can include the cost of designing the product to the cost of the inventory because you cannot anymore use it for future na mga production kasi it was designed specifically for a certain customer. So yung cost ng pag-design ng product na yun, i-charge mo sa cost of inventory. However, the following costs are excluded from the cost of inventories and recognized as expenses in the period when incurred. So yan, abnormal amount of wasted materials, labor, and other production cost. So mga results of production inefficiencies, hindi siya dapat ma-include as part of the cost of your inventory. Another is the storage cost. Unless these costs are necessary in the production process prior to the further production stage. Thus, the cost of the storage cost on goods in process are capitalized, but storage costs on finished goods are expensed. Let's say, for example, grapes, wine. So, wine are to be stored pa, or ang grapes ay isa-store pa yan for how many years before maging wine. So, meaning, part ang storage sa production. So, in that case, in manufacturing your wine, we can include storage costs as part of the inventory kasi part man talaga yun ng production. No, hindi pa tapos ang pag-produce ng wine or hindi matatapos ang pag-produce ng wine kung walang storage na mangyayari. No, walang storage ng grapes na mangyayari. So therefore, the storage cost in relation to that is capitalizable. However, kapag finished na ang product, like for example, meron ka ng bottled na wine. So, finished na ang goods, finished na yung wine. Say for example, you still have to store it in your warehouse, waiting for delivery. So, the cost of storage there should be expensed na. Kasi tapos namang na-produce yung product, ready na for distribution. So, yung storage cost on the finished product or the finished goods, dapat i-expense outright na yun. Another is administrative overheads that do not contribute to bringing inventories to their present location and condition. So, admin cost, na wala namang kinalaman sa pag-produce ng inventory. So, hindi related sa factory, for example. So, hindi siya kasama sa um, cost ng inventory. Another is distribution or selling cost, mga advertising, mga commission. So, hindi na yan kasama sa cost ng inventory. Expense na yan outright. So, the cost of inventories of a service provider. So, the cost of inventories of a service provider consists primarily of the labor and other costs of personnel directly engaged in providing the service, including the supervisory personnel and attributable overhead. Labor and other costs relating to the sales and general administrative personnel are not included but are recognized as expense in the period in which they incurred. So take note that inventories of a service provider is described as work in progress. So meron ka lang account na work in progress kapag meron kang project na hindi pa natapos at the end of an accounting or at the end of the accounting period. So yung i-include mo lang doon sa work in progress, ayun lang, labor and the cost, other cost of personnel directly engaged in providing the service. So yan, work in progress. Okay, so that's the end of our discussion in this particular topic, inventories. If you have questions, feel free to ask them during our online class. So thank you for patiently watching this video and I hope you learned something. Bye class and see you in the next video.